So hello again, and welcome back to part 2 of chapter 7. So we're going to go over, like I said, in the last part, I'm not a big fan of making you memorize every single bone, which professors did to me once. Anyway, um, so I'm going to go over some major differences I want to point out so that way you can identify them too. And I find this more useful than just sitting there and going, hey, what's this bone? Hey, what's this bone? Because that's more what I kind of want to get out of you with this, is just, be aware of what types of bones, and how they're different according to, where they are in the body and why they're like that. Because that's the important thing is not so much, remember the old adage I began this course with is form follows function. So if you look at the forms of these bones, it's directly related to the function of what they do in your skeleton and holding you up. And you're going to definitely see that in several different spots. So that's what I want more for you to pay attention to, if that makes sense. Hopefully that makes sense. Please let me know in the forums if that doesn't make sense. I try to make sense. Hopefully I do. Alright, so your skull has 22 bones, most of which are your facial bones. Am I going to beat you with these, like I said? No, I'm not. Just know that there's a lot of them in your skull. So, yeah, they're usually named on where they are. Notice your mandibular, it is like, again, the mandible, so it's your jaw. Again, it's the nasal bones. Gee, I wonder where that's found. In your ear? No, it's your nasal bones. You'll notice, again, a lot of these are named after where they are and what they do. And you'll notice with this, we have those fissures between the bones, and we'll talk about that in a minute. Hopefully, yep, here it is. So we have these cool gaps, which are called fontanelles. And as you age, these grow together. And you can see that in a skull, and we actually do have a real human skeleton in the lab. If you ever want to come on down and come see it, I am happy to show it to you as soon as I get done waxing the floor. Which they should be done by the time you would watch this video. So if you want to come on down and see a real human skeleton, I've got you. But you'll notice that on the skull, all these areas are grown together, and it kind of looks like a funky, the sides of a jigsaw, but crazier puzzle. Excuse me, jigsaw puzzle. Not the Saw movies. I'm not a big horror fan, but anyway. And yet, I like those true crime shows and podcasts. I guess I'm just weird like that. Anyway, so infants' heads, getting back to the point of this whole thing, infants' heads aren't completely developed because literally our heads are huge and we need to get them through our pelvis. And if you've ever seen a skeleton, and if you haven't, come on down, I'll show you some, getting a head that's also made of bone through the pelvis of the mother is pretty insane. And if you haven't had kids, I'm going to telling you from somebody who has had kids, getting that sucker out is the hardest part of getting birth, is getting the head out. Or at least that's the hardest part of, doing it vaginally. Getting cut open if you get a C-section. And like I said, I don't know why there's those people that sit there and be like, well, C-sections aren't real birth. No, you get cut open to get the kid out of you. Yeah, it's birth. So anyway, God, I don't know why people gatekeep on the strangest things. It's like, is the kid alive? Are you healing? It's still birth. Anyway. So basically the reason they have these gaps is that way so the head can collapse a bit so it can get through. That's why the fetal skull is so squishy, and kind of, why we have to be very delicate with their heads, because the poor kids don't have enough neck muscles because they've been floating in liquid the entire time, which supports the giant head, but now we have to shove it out and they have to get their head strength up, which is why we do a lot of, when the babies are old enough, tummy time, so they can get their heads up and everything, get practice and everything, get those neck muscles nice and strong, because we have big fat heads, if you haven't noticed, as a species. Anyway, so So we don't have, so when you're born with a skull that does not fuse together whatsoever. And this allows for two things. A, to get the kid out of you, and, us ladies, not you guys. And B, so the skull can grow with the child, because we do not want to come out with, a fully fused skull like you see in an adult right here, because the brain is still growing, and actually it grows a lot. So we need to be able to not have this fused together so it can grow with the brain, because the last thing you need is a tiny skull and then brains getting squished up against the skull, because that leads to a whole lot of brain damage. It's not good. So that's why we have a skull that is just not fused whatsoever. And that's actually kind of why you see, they put the kids in those helmets now to maintain the shape of the baby's head. Because this can get, the kid's laying on one side too long, you can get one side of the head that's all flat. And so that's why we have to be very careful with the fetal skull when a baby comes out, because, their skull is very, very still squishy. We do not want to squish. No squishy. So, now, your skull actually also can give away what age you were, because some parts of your skull do not fuse together until you're finally in your 30s or 40s. Usually, if there's still like some of a gap between it, that usually means the person that was, again, going back to one of my former roommates used to call it my death shows. That's how she used to call it, all those true crime things. But if it's you can see a gap between the fontanelles, and literally what's going on right there is like that usually can tell you what age the person was when they were, died, whether it be natural or unnatural. Anyway, so this growing is and coming out of the birth canal is called molding. So that's why babies' heads after, vaginal birth look a little weird, because they just went in to get out. And they retain that shape for a bit until it relaxes and hopefully starts growing properly. But like I said, then we put some kids need that helmet to help them with their head formation, so that way they don't have one side that's all flat and stuff like that. So anyway, so it's interesting. Now, it's really cool. We don't do it today. Instead, we try to maintain the roundness of our heads by using those helmets. But back in the day, different cultures used to actually strap bands on babies' heads to make them have that long, especially in the South American ancient civilizations. One of them definitely strapped planks to the baby's head, so that way the head elongated out the back. It didn't hurt the brain or anything, it just changed the shape of the skull, and I thought that was good looking. And apparently the ancient Egyptians used to do it too. So there have been cultures that put straps on babies' heads to mold the skull as they grow into a certain shape, because that civilization found that good looking. Today we don't. We don't like that much, so we just put a helmet on them and say, yeah, let's keep them nice and round. So, yeah, we don't do that extreme body modification on babies. That's very much frowned upon around here. Anyway, because if you want extreme body modification, you need to have consent. Anyway. So, spine. So the bony parts of the vertebra, which are separated by masses of fibrocartilage, are called the intervertebral discs. So, we have sections of our spine, and this is where we find the differences in the spine bones themselves. So, you've got your cervical, which are thinner, and they allow you to move your head around, so you can do this. And that's from C1 to C7. And then you got your thoracic, which is, again, going through from your shoulders down to your mid-back. And that's T1 to T12. And then you've got your lumbar, L1 to L5. And you'll notice the shapes are differing between these. Then you got your sacrum, and then you got your coccyx. Your sacrum is the back part of your pelvis, although then you got your pelvis in a minute. We'll talk about him in a minute. And then your coccyx, which is your tailbone. Now, I've broken my coccyx twice for surezies. It's not fun. I broke it first time because I grew up on a horse farm, and I grew up riding pretty much in the saddle, which makes me sad because I no longer have horses, and I wish I had horses. Anyway, oh well. But I was on a pony, and I did a sit on a trot, and ponies, if you've ever been on a pony, their trot is like, and doing a sit trot, yeah, I did it. His backbone came up and hit my backbone, and his backbone won. And I broke my coccyx, and then I couldn't sit straight for a month. It was terrible trying to heal that sucker. I was always like leaning over going, ah. Anyway, and then the second time I destroyed it was in high school, and we were doing that, what is it, that presidential, back in the day they used to make you do those presidential get healthy things. Trying to think. Anyway, so I was having to do a bunch of sit-ups on a plank, but the padding on the plank didn't come down long enough for me, and I cracked my coccyx again. It was not fun. And I was in pain for another month. And this is why flying out to California to see my in-laws, which I love to do, honestly, I love going out there, and I love my in-laws, they're awesome people, but flying 6 hours or 5 hours, oh God, I can't take it. Those airline seats are horrible. I have to bring like an extra pillow, a neck pillow, but fluffier to sit on, literally. So that way I'm just like on it. So I'm off my tailbone because it hurts. It hurts. Anyway, don't break your coccyx. You're welcome. And if you have broken your coccyx, I'm sorry. It sucks. But let's just check it out. So again, so infants start out with 33 separate bones in your vertebra, but eventually these fuse become the 26 we normally have. Now, some people have more of these fused than others. Like my mother has several cervicals that are fused. It doesn't bother her in any way. It's just the way her neck is. One time they did an x-ray up here and it just said, hey, did you know a couple of your cervical spines are fused? And she was like, huh. That's why when we say there's 206 bones in the body, give or take, because everybody's different, and some people have more fused in your backbone than other people. So, depending on how they're fused. So anyway, notice the cervical spine right here. So this is like the empty area is basically where your nervous system, the meat of your nervous system is going through right here. So we have the protected area of our spinal cord, so that way that doesn't get damaged. But notice the differences here in basically where the weight is distributed. Notice here in the cervical spine the differences. So we've got this part right here because basically that allows the cervical spine to get more of a twist going, so we can move our head around and stuff like that, and nod when and it's like, no, I'm not going to eat that broccoli. The thoracic spine, again, we've got a bigger main place right here for the weight going down through here. So that, again, it gives stability as well as some flexibility. So again, we can move around our upper body. However, the lumbar, notice how most of the lumbar right here takes the weight right here, because basically it's got the entire weight of everything up here on it. And so that's holding up the weight of not only your upper body, but also your viscera hanging out, although your hips actually capture more of your viscera. So we'll talk about that. Your hips hold the weight of your viscera, but your lumbar is holding the weight pretty much thoracic up. So that's why they need to have a larger head area right here, so that way, it's carrying all that weight. So again, notice the difference. That's what I want you to zero in on. I want you to be able to differentiate between a cervical spine, a thoracic spine, and a lumbar piece if I just, threw it out at you. That's what I want you to kind of zoom in on, not, how many are there? And that we split it up into 3 sections, the cervical, the thoracic, and the lumbar. Okay? Does that make sense? Okay, good. I don't know. You're not here to tell me. All right, ribs. Here's another one. I want to get into the different types of ribs. So again, we've got your, I like to talk about your sternum here, and you got your clavicle, which again, if you've ever popped it, of course, I hope you've never broken a clavicle. I had a student once, we just moved into the new building on Blue Ridge's campus, the new high school building, and we have these huge windows, and it was always funny because the kids are always going, I bet I could break those windows. Actually, those windows are nigh indestructible. I mean, you're going to have to get something that isn't allowed on campus to break those suckers, because one time the boys were all playing like touch football or something, and one of them ran back, caught the ball, and slammed into the windows and broke his skull. So that wasn't cool. Anyway, so most people have about 24 ribs, give or take. And we split the ribs into 3 groups. You got your true ribs, your false ribs, and your floating ribs. So your true ribs go from 1 down to 7. Your false ribs go down from 8 to 10. And your floating ribs are pretty much 11, 12, and that's about it. The floating ribs are not attached to the costal cartilage. This is the costal cartilage. This is not part of your rib, but it attaches to your sternum right here to make that wonderful cage. Now, why do we have cartilage right here, not bone all the way around? Well, again, we need to be able to stretch when we breathe deeply, but still be able to protect our lungs and our heart, because that's kind of what these guys are doing. Not only is it getting us stability for our upper body, but it's also protecting our lungs and our heart, because they're kind of vital to the whole living bit. So we need something to give, again, some stretch, and so that's why it's costal cartilage, and some flex. So we need to be able to have some flex in there, because if it was all just one solid mass, you probably look like a really crazy bodybuilder that's like, huge pectorals and can't move the chest very well. So yeah, that's why it's not, we need some give and take in here. And so that's why costal cartilage actually attaches to all of the ribs. So that way we're not, going, I can't move my upper body. So yeah, we need some give. You need some give. Everybody needs some give. So anyway. And the sternum is actually made up of several parts too. It's got the menubarium, which is right here at the top, kind of attaches to the top true ribs, which are kind of interesting. And then we've got the sternum angle, which is this top piece right, sternum angle, which is right here, that attaches that. Got the body, which is the main part. And then you've got your xiphoid process, which is that weird sticky outy bit at the end. I don't know why we have that. If you figure it out, let me know. All right, so now that's one way, the true ribs, the false ribs, and the floating ribs. There's another way to do it, and that is by how they look. And there's atypical ribs and then ribs. So the atypical ribs are basically, there's just a couple. And that I usually, again, I'd like you to know the difference. Like if I throw a rib at you, like this is the first rib, notice how much thicker it is. It's an atypical rib. It's the shortest and the broadest. It's most sharply curved. It has grooves for the vessels and one basically, articulated area. So notice here how ribs kind of attach. And you'll see this. It has a head, a neck, and a tubercle. And what happens is you put it up here, and it has the angle right here. If you put it on, the vertebra, you'll notice the tubercle matches up perfectly with this part right here on the vertebra, and attaches right here to on the vertebra as well. So it has 2 attachment points, which is why you have boop-a-doop and boop-a-doop right here. The 2 attachment points on the thoracic spines. Pretty cool, huh? And you only see that on the thoracic spines, because that's where the rib cage is. So that's why there's 2 attachment points. So again, the second rib is also an atypical. Typical ribs are basically right here. This is the 8th rib that just pulled out. Again, it's got the crest of the head and a tubercle, and it's got, it's more curvy. You don't usually see such an insane angle like you do on the atypical ribs. And it has a cusp right there for attaching to the costal cartilage on the other end. So this is a typical rib. And then the floating ribs are very simple as well. They're also considered atypical. So the 11th rib right here, it has a head. You don't see a tubercle on it because it's kind of a floater. And again, it does have a bit of an angle, but it doesn't have a cusp for attaching to costal cartilage because it doesn't attach. It's a floating rib. Same thing, 12th rib, very small. So basically, what I want you to know here is if I throw a typical rib at you and an atypical rib, that you know that one's a typical rib, you can pick up, I go, this is a typical rib, and this is an atypical rib. And the flatter and broader and bigger they are usually means they're up at the top, versus the floaters are really kind of down, and you can see they're very thinnish, just hanging out. So that's, they go thick and broad down to skinny and not broad. Yeah. All right. So again, atypical, atypical, typicals. And true ribs, false ribs, floating ribs. So that's basically what I want you to get out of, identifying ribs. Unless you're eating the ribs. I used to work at a barbecue joint. I don't like barbecue sauce anymore. Just, ugh. I do like, when you get a nice rub on the meat, that's cool. I just don't like drowning my meat in sauce that I don't like. But anyway, that's just me. Anyway, typical ribs, again, made up of a shaft, a head, and tubercles. So, sternum is made up of membranum, the body, and the xiphoid process. And it is held in place by the ribs and the costal cartilages. So there you go. Alright, now, pectoral girdle is made up of 2 clavicles and the scapula. Dun dun dun. There might be. I wouldn't go too crazy on that one. I just like saying scapula. There's your clavicle. Then your humerus, because we find this humorous. Bad jokes, bad jokes. I have them all. And then you got your radius and your ulna, and then again in your hand you got the 8 carpals. The palm has 5 metacarpals, and then the fingers have 14 phalanges. Phalanges. Because it's fun to say. Then you've got your pelvic girdle. Oh, by the way, if you ever wondered why girdle your loins is a saying, is actually because what they used to do is, before you got into a fight back in the day when everybody was wearing togas and stuff, before pants, before pants. That's how we should measure time, before pants and after pants. I just think that would be time according to Miss Royal. Yeah. Anyway, so the hip bones basically are carrying all of your visceral weight. So that's why they're scooped like this. And us ladies have a larger arc right here than the boys do, because we've got to pass a kid through there. We don't have to, but we're built for it usually. Anyway, so the pelvis is formed off of the hip bones, the sacrum, and the coccyx. These bones support the weight of your body, of your visceral organs, etc. So that way, and don't break your coccyx, it hurts. So there you go. Fun stuff, fun stuff. So these are your hip bones. Now you'll notice right here too, also if you come in to come stare at the skeletons I have, and I have many, there's a there's a symphysis pubis, which is right here, which is just a piece of cartilage. And the reason we have that, again, is give and take, to make it flexible. Because once again, for us ladies, if we decide, or, have already done it, push a kid out this way, we need some give definitely right there, so we can get a little bit, get some wideness going on. But also just in plain, again, if this was just a pure circle, something's going to break in doing, especially just sports or heck, just walking. So that's why we have cartilage right here. It's not completely mushed together right there. And we have a little bit so that way we can, again, have some give in our bones, so we're not, one big rigid mass of trouble that can't walk right. So anyway, just in case, this was something that when I was reading your book, I kind of found a little like, what? And that was the difference between the greater pelvis and the lesser pelvis, or the false pelvis and the true pelvis, because your book kind of like shows it and doesn't really show it at the same time. I don't know. I didn't enjoy how the book showed it. So just to give you an idea, if you were confused about this part like I was, the greater false pelvis is the part with the, the scoops basically, right here, which actually does have a name. It's called the ilium. Thank you. The ilium. I should actually use science terms. The ilium. So if the ilium anything from here above is the ilium, and that's the false pelvis. The true pelvis is pretty much from the front, which is the subpubic angle, and following the lines back of the false pelvis and whatnot. This is the true pelvis, basically, where the spine comes down and the tail and the coccyx curls around. So this is the true pelvis. Okay, so false is up here, true pelvis down there. Great, greater, lesser, greater, lesser. Why is it called the greater and or false and the true and or lesser? Well, the greater usually means up, and lesser usually means down. That's just another distinguishing term. However, why is it called false and true? I don't know. Nobody told me that one, so I don't know. Again, if you find that out, let me know. I'd like to know. All right, lower bones. So again, what do we need them for? Locomotion, carry the weight of the entire erect body, supports, points for muscular attachments, because, you know, we need to be able to walk, or else these bones ain't going to walk themselves. We'll get into that next week when we talk about muscles. Chapter 9's a big chapter. We're going to be pretty much spending a week on chapter 9. It's a big chapter. So here's my friend, the kneecap. It's the patella. Actually, had a student a couple semesters ago had to go get surgery on her patella, because what happened is, for whatever reason, it fractured, but it didn't really fracture, it splintered more. They literally had to go in and shave it down. It was pretty intense. So they had to go in and shave the splinters off. It was just splintering naturally. It was weird. I don't think she did anything to it, because I talked to her about it. Because she was thankfully very open about it. She's like, oh yeah, I gotta go get it shaved because my bones are all spiky. And I was like, really? And then I talked to her mom, and she showed me pictures and everything. It was really interesting. But yeah, they had to literally go in and shave her patella down till it's smooth again, because it was splintering on one side for some reason. And that was, of course, the splinters were poking into all the freaking, all the tissue around there, and it's not good. It's not good when your knee is stabbing you. Don't let your knees stab you. Anyway, so again, components, you got your femur right here, you got your patella, you got your tibia and your fibia, you got your tarsals, and you've got your metatarsals, and you got your phalanges, which are your toesies. So there you go. So, let's talk about aging with your bones. We have a decrease in height, starts at age 30. Uh-oh, I'm 43. Anyway, gradually bone loss exceeds bone replacement, unless you're a reptile like Monty. Thanks to menopause, women lose more bone density than men, but then by age 70, bone loss is same between the sexes, so the guys catch up by age 70. We just do it early because, we're efficient like that? Question mark. Not really. Anyway, women we use a lot more, usually because we're going through, our periods and whatnot, when it uses a lot of calcium. We're actually going to get into that a bit more next semester when we talk about the differences between the sexes, when we go over the the reproductive system. So we use a lot more calcium because of our, monthly time, whereas guys don't have to worry about that. But again, by age 70, we're all caught up with each other. And we have equally weak bones, unless you've been exercising, like my mom. My mom constantly is exercising. She makes me feel lazy. But I am, so, Anyway, aging increases risk of bone fractures, and that's why we are, always looking at new, medications for osteoporosis risk and whatnot. But honestly, the best way to fight this is staying active. And you don't have to go crazy active, like, get muscles, because I've seen some elderly, bodybuilders, and that made me go, oh. Some people, yeah. But anyway, and if you're into that, cool, good for you. Just saying. Anyway, so, where was I going with this? I was going somewhere. Yeah, exercise. It is good for you. I should take my own advice. Yes, I should. Actually, I'm probably going to go for a walk after this. Anyway, but that's it. I believe that's it. Yep, that's it. So, you guys take it easy, and I'll see you in chapter 18. Goodbye.